Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington Realtors Legal Hotline lawyer, and I want to talk to you today about the National Association of Realtors Clear Cooperation Policy and a recent amendment to that policy. When we talk about the NAR's CCP, we have to also discuss the Northwest MLS listing policy mandating that all listings be entered in the computer before public marketing happens. The reason we're going to discuss those together is because they are two very similar policies from two different MLSs. And I love that we can discuss these two policies right now on the heels of the CCP amendment because they are absolutely tied to fair housing. And as we celebrate fair housing within the fair housing laws and all of the goals attendant to fair housing within our nation and within our state, it is absolutely appropriate to discuss these two listing policies that mandate residential property be marketed through a broker's MLS. So again, two different MLSs, two different policies by title with some slight differences in the policies. But the goal of both policies is that residential property will be marketed through a multiple listing service so that it has broad exposure to all potential buyers, regardless of the buyer's membership in a protected class, regardless of the color of a buyer's skin, the religion practiced by the buyer, the sexual preference of the buyer, or any other immutable characteristic associated with any specific buyer. Why is this important? And why is it nice that we can discuss this during Fair Housing Month? These two policies go to the heart of fair housing in this way. You don't have to go too far back in our nation's and our industry's history to know that there was a time, certainly a time before the advent of multiple listing services, where property, when it was available, would be exposed to only a very small group of buyers. If a seller or a listing broker wanted to restrict the availability of residential property to a specific type of buyer, meaning a type of buyer based on skin color, religion, mental processing, whatever it might be, the property's exposure could easily be limited because prior to the advent of multiple listing services, listing brokers exposed property only to buyers within their sphere of influence, buyers within their circle of knowledge, or within the seller's circle of knowledge, keeping neighborhoods oftentimes very consistent with respect to occupancy by people who share very similar immutable characteristics and excluding all others. Whether that was intentional or unintentional, that was the effect of limiting the exposure of property because there was no multiple listing service. Now, we enjoy robust multiple listing services all across the country and certainly all across Washington state. And all of the MLSs in Washington state are subject to either NAR MLS rules or Northwest MLS rules. And both of those organizations share the commonality of having a rule mandating that the property be marketed through the MLS, with one exception. The NAR CCP policy has always had an exception to the policy called the office exclusive exception. And what the office exclusive exception allows is an NAR MLS member to work with their seller if the seller gives an instruction saying, based on something about me or my property, I don't want all of the notoriety and the publicity that comes with broad exposure through the MLS. Particularly in light of the fact that almost every MLS shares the data from the MLS, the availability of properties, broadly through the World Wide Web. And some sellers have said, I don't want all that notoriety, I don't want all that publicity. And so the only option for those sellers has been to opt into an exception called the office exclusive. And if a seller opts into the office exclusive exception of the NAR CCP, that means that there can be no public marketing of the property. The availability of the property for sale will be made known only through the listing office, no public marketing at all. Because if there is public marketing made, then the property must be listed in the NAR MLS within a day. There are some sellers out there, though, who would say, look, I don't need my listing to be that exclusive. I do want to, however, protect my listing from the broad exposure of the World Wide Web. And can't there be some middle ground? Introducing the recent amendment to the Clear Cooperation Policy. The amendment to the policy now says that a seller can still opt into the office exclusive exception if they choose to do so. And in order to do so, they've always had to, and they still have to, have an informed consent about the marketing opportunities they're losing, and they have to agree to that. Now they have the option of opting into a more middle road position. With this more middle road position, they would tell their listing broker, I don't want exposure on the World Wide Web, but I do want my property to be listed in your MLS. And I want all of the brokers who are members of your MLS to know about the availability of my property and to have the access to my property to show it to the buyers they represent. And the recent modification says a seller can instruct their listing broker to advertise the property through the MLS so that all MLS members have access to the property, the availability of the property. All MLS members can introduce the property to any buyer the MLS member may represent, but withhold for a defined time period the availability of the property through the larger exposure, the worldwide exposure available through syndication and IDX feeds. Again, the seller who opts into this new category of exception to the CCP will also have to receive the information about the marketing exposure they're giving up and sign an informed consent acknowledging that that is what they want. local NAR MLSs will have to develop a policy around this new exception, and the local MLS policy will identify the amount of time that the property can be withheld from marketing through the World Wide Web. And that will be different from different locations. The consent language, the informed consent, those documents will be determined by each local MLS. And so they'll vary from location to location. But the policy itself provides an opportunity for a seller's property to have the broad exposure made available through advertising in the MLS, while allowing the seller to say, just not the World Wide Web yet. Let's give an opportunity in the local market to find a buyer before we go through the World Wide Web. The Northwest MLS policy has had long-standing opportunities for sellers who want certain protections or to limit certain exposures. I don't represent the Northwest MLS. I don't enforce Northwest MLS policies. I do know that those opportunities exist. If you're representing a seller who wants to take advantage of some of those opportunities, and you're a member of Northwest MLS, you should reach out to the Northwest MLS about what those opportunities might be. Ultimately, both of these MLS policies are supportive of and consistent with the goals of fair housing laws and fair housing intent, and should be embraced by members of our industry. Members of our industry can debate many issues. The one issue that is beyond debate is that the goals of fair housing are absolutely essential and good. And these MLS policies further those goals. If you have questions on this topic or any other, please ask me a question by visiting warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington Realtors member.